Hello, my name's Stephen from K-Scale Models, and today I'm doing a video about why we would separate parts for 3D printing. So, I've actually been asked this from a number of different sources. The 3D printed side, generally people like one model that they can just stick on their build plate and hit print. So I can understand from that. But I've also had this from the scale modeling community. And that's a bit weird considering scale modeling community generally likes to assemble parts. So yeah, a bit weird in that. So I thought I'd do a video on why I do this and some of the tricks that I use to like make parts match together, because I've seen parts in the past that have not matched together and don't work. So let's start off with the obvious reason of why we split parts up. It doesn't always fit in the build space. In fact, this model is so big it's kind of broken chew box. So yeah, now there is other times that you would split it up for height reasons. As I said in my 3D printed commissions video, I think it was part 2, time in the printer is what costs money. So if your print takes the full build height, okay, that's 30-40 hours, that's what we're charging for. If it say takes half the build height but you've had to print 2 parts for it, that might become more economical because that might go down to 10 to 15 hours or something. So yeah, that is one of the big reasons, but it's not the biggest one in my book. And I'm going to use these 3 models as kind of a demonstration. Now, bear in mind that this is all for demonstration. This is not how people would generally make models. So this one is actually a made model. This is the Freedom from Gundam X. It's a Patreon build, so if you want to see that, go check the description below. It'll have links to it. But this is it just being made into one solid piece. And this is me now trying to put supports on. Now, first thing, this I know from making it, it's a right pain to make. This is where the highest failures are when I'm printing this, and I'm actually making this as a separate part when I'm making the kits up. This is not normally a pain to print, but look at this. That is at a shallow angle there. That is likely to, well, first off, it needs support here and probably here as well, and that is a very thin part and it probably will break. So yeah, there's other thin parts like these cranes at the back. It's just no. This is not a good way of printing it, and this kind of leans into why I break parts up. Orientation. Parts have what I call a natural orientation. I'm going to use this as a demonstration. So let's go and put this in a sort of orientation you'd be expecting people to print it. So first off, let's make sure it's all inside the build space. So again, this is the Saturn. I think it's the Saturn anyway. Yeah, it's the Saturn. So you can tell right away that's a big model. Now, let's go and try to support it. So if we try to support it, look straight away, it's got to have support points all over the place because this is, you can't orientate this in a good manner. Now, let's move this off to the side and move in this part. So this part would be, say, this split into 4. Now, when I go to hold that in a moment, you'll see that I've kind of cheated on this, but again, this is just demonstration purposes. So, as you can see, much less supports. Now, I could even cheat further for this one. I could make this vertical. So if we go, take those supports off, make it vertical, hit all I need to support is the bottom. So this is a big win for like why I would orientate things in certain directions and why I need to split them off. So let's reorientate this back to this way. And put the supports back in, because I'm now also going to demonstrate another part. So bring this back in, move Freedom out of the way, I don't need you. So I am now going to hollow this. Now this is kind of par for the course. If you've got a big model like this, you don't want to use all the resin up by printing this all as a solid chunk. You want to have this as hollowed out. It also makes it easier to print because there's less peel force, and this is a kind of killer for a lot of models, is the peel force is just so great in certain orientations that you get big marks on it. So let's avoid that by putting some holes in the bottom, and then just a couple of holes here. And oh look, we've got to put a hole in here, and put a couple, again just make sure that this is not going to fail. And I'm probably going to need to put in a couple on the side, just to allow it to easily breathe and not allow suction to build up. Again, oh, coming back to this, I now need to put some holes in here, because that's its own part. And then we've got parts here, so this is probably needs some, because if not we'll get some suction. I'm ignoring this bit because that's just kind of a mess, and that's because I'm doing this quickly. But again, I might want to put some sort of holes in here just to prevent it having a vacuum being pulled. A couple here. Oh look, it's starting to split off, so I'll probably put something in here. And if I'm being really clever, I can maybe get some in here and here, so that when it's at the end of the print, all that's just coming out. And I do start thing here and here. Now, that's a lot of holes that I've had to add to this just to get it to print well. So yeah, and even then, I'm not convinced that that will work. So let's move this off to the side and let's hollow this one out. So just go down to the bottom. Again, we'll put some holes in, and just a couple of holes. I'm probably putting in more holes than what I normally would for something like this, but this is just for demonstration purposes again. Oh, and Chitterbox, what are you doing? Add hole. Add hole. I think I broke the Chitterbox with all the holes. Oh no, it's decided to accept holes again. Okay. So yeah, that is so much easier to print. Now, this is on purpose a nasty shape. It is not something that's easily 3D printed. However, there is a sort of analog in the 3D printing scale modeling sort of community. A hand. A hand for a model will have fingers on it. Generally, that's what hands are for, and have fingers on. So, I've only done 2, but there'd normally be 5. So you get the idea that if you've got to support each and every finger, that's a lot of supports. And what you might be able to do is you might be able to orientate this in a way that means that you don't have to do as many supports. But let's just say it was this, where we'll just say for the sake of argument, these are hands, this is the head, and I'm not even going to speculate on what that is. You get the idea that this would need a lot of supports, and you might find parts breaking. Now, with scale modelers, yeah, we could go in and fix that, but why take the hassle when you can just make this? So yeah, that is the reason why I would mainly be splitting parts into separate bodies, is so that, yeah, it makes it easier to assemble. Oh, sorry, it makes it easier to print, and all it takes is a bit of assembly at your end. And to be honest, for scale modelers, that's kind of what we do. So, next bit. This is not as important, but it is kind of a reason. So, this is the 110 scale Buster rifle I showed you earlier. Now, being Gundam, it's got several different colours on this already. So we've got gunmetal here for those bits, grey for the main body, we've got silver, and we've got yellow at the bottom. Okay, so normally what I would do is I just print this all out in one colour and then put it together and paint it, which is what I'm going to be doing for this shortly. But, well, what if you wanted to print this out as its own parts and then assemble it once painted, or print it out in the right colours? That is what a lot of Bandai kits are done with. They are done in such a way that you can paint them before assembly, or you can just do sub-assemblies and then paint those, and you've got minimum amount of masking, because the way the kit's been designed, there's colour separation built in. So that is something to consider, especially if you're making Gunpla models. That might be a sort of selling point to someone that, oh look, this has got color separation, therefore when I'm painting it all up, I can just have all the blue parts together, all the red parts, etc. I don't have to start messing around. So yeah, that's one thing to consider, but not a major consideration. So now I'm going to go on and just explain how I make sort of parts. So let's take off this body here. So these are the holes. Actually, let's go around to the first bit. So this side. So if I do that, that'll get us back to where I made these. So there is 4 type of connections I use. 2 are kind of similar, but I'll explain where I use different ones. So first one is a circle. So circles are only really good if you are, say, needing a part to still rotate after assembly. So let's say it's an arm of an action figure, or it's a barrel of a gun that needs to rotate, or it's a turret on a ship. This would be the ideal one, because that way you can move it left to right. Where it's not good is if you want the part to stay in that orientation and it's only got one way it fits, because a pin like that gives you ability to rotate. And to be honest, this is kind of a loose one. I found that, say, the square here is better if you're just wanting to pin 2 parts together that should not move, and there's a fairly limited pin area. So that's this. Yeah, you can see I've dimensioned these all up, but they're not really needed to be. So yeah, so this, as I said, will generally keep your body fairly rigid, and if there's a fairly small area to connect the 2 parts, that's probably the best. Now, what might be a better one for some of those scenarios is this, a keyed one. Now, what's the purpose of a keyed pin? It's there so that you cannot physically assemble the model the wrong way around. And this is, again, going back to, like, say, Bandai or even IKEA, you make things so that they can only be assembled one way. There's no ambiguity in the assembly. People do not try to assemble things the wrong way around and glue it in and then realize, oh, I've messed that up and I can't unglue it. So yeah, that's that one. Now, this is another one. So say you've got 2 parts that are fairly long and need to connect together. That is where I would use a big rectangle, because you don't want to have 2 parts to connect things together. You just want one. And part of the reason for that is sometimes you get warpage in the print. So let's just say you've not quite got the hole right at the bottom of this and it pulls a vacuum. Well, that part now warps. Or you've got, say, debris from when you were like the supports or something. Well, that now gives you a bit of a problem. Now you can like 1 part, that's not hard to sand, but 2 parts and then keeping it all orientated, because now these parts are no longer as tight fit as you were supposed to have. Yeah, that could be an issue. So big long squares or rectangles for keeping big objects together. Don't use multiple. So going forward, let's have a look at what I've then done. So I've then taken all these parts and I've offset them 0.2. So why am I offsetting 0.2? Well, I found that the best clearance for parts is about 0.2. There is some people that have got this right down to like 0.0194, etc. But no, I find 0.2 is good enough and will work on a variety of machines out there. Because again, this is being not just made for me, this is being made for other people to print, and I can't control how like good their printer is, but I still want them to have a good experience making my models. So 0.2 generally works. I have in some cases knocked this down to 0.1, but yeah, 0.2 is probably the best way of doing it. Now, with regards to cutting this out, now I'm going to take off the bottom part. So I've done an extrusion 2-sided, and the top part here is just whatever I needed to get past all the material there. But here, I've got it down as 0.4. Now, why have I done this? Well, as I said, all parts are 0.2 clearances. This actually includes, if I bring this back, these two parts. They are 0.2 millimeters apart. So, if I do, wrong one, that one. So if I put a clearance down of 0.4, what this means is it's taking into account the clearance for this part to the pin, but it also takes into account this part. So it might be a case that when you're assembling it, this becomes fairly flush, or say you don't need a clean tolerances as 0.2. Well, now this will now lay flat against each other, or at least it won't lay flat against each other. It will have a gap, but the gap is somewhere that no one's going to see, and all that's going to be in there is glue, and the glue kind of needs its own little room. So making this part 0.4 kind of does help. So yeah, that's quite important. Now, there is another way of doing this, and I'm going to kind of show you on a real world example here. Actually, no. Before going to the real world example for that, I'm going to give you the real world example for these type of connectors. So, this is the Freedom 2. Again, this is a Patreon project. So, let's go and have a quick look at this. So, we can see that we've got several different types of connector that we're using. So, first one I'm going to just illustrate here is the big rectangle. So if we take off this one, so what is this body? This is B1. So again, this goes back to the previous video regarding assembly and instructions. So let's bring in A1. So we can see here that that is a nice big square hole, and it's got a fairly long connection point. So take that off and you can see that is a fair chunk of the length of the part. So that's a nice big connection. That's going to fit. So yeah, that is why that's been done. Now, again, square peg for the bridge. So this will now fit together quite nicely. These turrets have got round ones, so you can orientate the turrets. You can't get the barrels to really elevate the press. We're talking too fine a scale, and the resin just is not up to the challenge. So yeah, that's that side. Now, I want to bring your attention to another type I use. This I'm calling the outline method. So small parts like this, I just take the outline and extrude down and then kind of extrude out to the side. So we take off A3 and show A2. We've got that hole there, and you can see here that's been pushed out about 0.2 millimeters. So yeah, we've got a similar one for the front here. So this is A4, we take that off and we see that there's a hole that's kind of matching up with the silhouette of A4. So yeah, that is the kind that I would use for this. Now there is another sort of one, and it kind of is with the silhouette. So let's go and have a look. So actually I'm going to take off A3 here. That'll make it easier to see. So what we see here is these big panel lines. Now, this is 1/10 scale. If you start measuring panel lines up on a model kit, you'll start realizing quite quickly how big they are if you scaled them up right. So these are always artistic license. These are never actually to scale. So I thought with this one, I would use these to hide the joins, because I knew this was going to have to be multiple joins, and it was going to look nasty if I printed it certain ways, and it would also possibly warp, because when I was making this was in December, and yeah, it was a little cold. So anyway, see, this is kind of all hidden by the panel line. Now this is just the silhouette one. So if I take off this part, you'll see that it's just kind of the silhouette extruded forward. Now with this particular model, the way that this was working is parts were kind of slanted, but you can't really have these as slanted. You have to try to keep them straight and level because it makes it easier to assemble. So yeah, I just basically offset the outline of this and then extruded that out. Now I did in this part leave some room for the top section, and you can see here they've got the exact same thing. If we put a 3 back in, you can see that they've got an outline there. So yeah, or sorry, a panel line. So yeah, that is another trick to use, and I want to explore this one more because I reckon for making actual mobile suits, this might be an interesting way of doing it. Now, there's one other part with this I want to just highlight quickly. Remember how I said I made the gap here to here 0.4? This is going to be bigger than 0.4 if I remember right. Let's see. Yeah, that's 1 millimeter. So why did I do that? Well, this is going to be, well, to be honest, these panel lines are ridiculously big. So if they're slightly smaller, it doesn't really matter. So it gives a nice big area to put things like glue in. And also, if people put too much glue in, what happens? Glue squirts out the side and goes into the panel line. So I don't want people to have to try to sand out this panel line. I want the glue to stop about here. So that's why I made that area, because that's a nice big area for the glue to settle in. So yeah, that makes it easier to like assemble at the user's end. So that's just a couple of tricks there that I've learned for this. So yeah, that is kind of the things that I'll do for why I separate parts off, and when I separate them off, how I then connect them again. So I hope you found this interesting, and if you have, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow K-Scale Models YouTube side into more tutorials and other things. I'm still open to suggestions, so if you've got any ideas or anything that you're interested regarding 3D printing and Gunpla related 3D printing, please give me a comment below and tell me what you're interested in, or message me. You'll find me on Facebook. All the links for that will be in the description. So, thank you for watching.